Hey, what's up, folks? All right, so this is our Thursday video lecture series. We are going to be looking at today another application that we're going to build. And this application was one of the first games that was ever created with computer programming, and it was called Pong. So Pong is something very similar to like a breakout type of game where you have a paddle on the bottom and then you have the ball kind of bouncing around. In those cases, you're breaking blocks to earn points. In this case, the ball is just going to bounce around the screen, and when it hits our paddle, we are going to accrue 1 point. So I'm going to build a portion of it, and then for your assignment for the week is you're going to need to finish it along with the enhancements that need to be made. All right, so let's get building. All right, so long story short is the way my train of thought with building this application is, and actually let me let me switch screens really quick, and then I'll kind of sketch it out for you so you can kind of see what's going on, and we'll go from there. All right, so if this were my App Inventor screen, all right, so I'm going to keep it very basic. What I'm going to have is I'm going to have an arrangement that's going to be listed on the top here. What I'll do is I'll have the top broken down in 3 pieces, kind of like how I had originally with the Paint app. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a start button in the top left. I'm going to have a reset button in the top right. And then I'm going to have a label in the top center, and the purpose of the label is to show my score. All right? So with that being said, what am I going to do? What else do I need to do? Well, the rest in here, all right, all in here, this is going to be my canvas. And again, the reason why I'm using my canvas function is because I want to use another concept within this program, which are called image sprites, which image sprites are, and balls are basically very similar in concept. All right, so I'm going to use an image sprite. And then I'm going to overlay an image on the image sprite, and it's going to be that of a paddle. All right, and so that will be the paddle that will be able to slide back and forth. And then I'm also going to have a ball, which technically is an image sprite, but the App Inventor already has that built into the code where it's literally a ball feature. And the whole point behind that is the ball is going to bounce around the screen. When it hits the paddle, we are going to score a point. And then if it reaches the very bottom of my screen, I want it to be game over on the bottom. And then if it hits the sides of the ceiling, then it's going to just bounce off and move on. All right, so that is the train of thought that I have with building this program. So with that being said, let's get into it. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm going to have 3 objects on the top. And I'm going to put them horizontal with each other. So in order to do that, I need to drop a horizontal arrangement into my program. All right, and just like I normally would, I would take this arrangement and I'm going to change the properties of it. So I'm going to go over to height, and I'm going to change the pixels, and I'm going to just use, actually, I'll make them a little bigger this time. Let's do 50. And then the width, I am going to do a fill parent on, so it goes across the screen. All right, so I don't need the buttons or the score to look super big up top here. Having more space in the center of my screen here is optimal, because that's where my canvas is going to be, and my canvas is going to fit in the entire rest of the area. So I want a nice big screen so that I can kind of play my video game with. All right, so like I said, we're up at the top here. We're going to have a button. So let's grab a button. We're going to drop it into our arrangement. And then the middle section here is going to be my label. So let's grab our label and let's drop it in the center here. And then lastly, we're going to grab a button, and we're going to drop the button up in the top here. All right, so like I normally done with the previous programs, I'm going to click on each object, and I am going to change some properties of them. So if you want, normally I normally don't, change colors or aspects of things. But if you want to, provide a little bit of color into your program this time, you can. I'm going to change and put just randomly pick colors, pick cyan for text for button 1. Remember, that's my start button. So I'm going to go down here to rename. So instead of button 1, we're going to call it button start. Excuse me. And then I am going to go back into properties. I want to change the width to fill parent, and then I'm going to change the height to fill parent. Oops. Remember, because we are inside the arrangement, and so therefore when I scale the fill parent, it's going to fill the arrangement, not the screen. All right, and then we're going to get rid of text for button 1, and we're just going to type in the word start. All right, so again, text for label 1. Being that this is the only label in my program, I don't have to change it, but again, to keep everything consistent with renaming names, I want to call this label score, so I know that that's specifically what I'm dealing with. And then again, on this side over here, we're going to go to the height and width to fill parent. And then text for label 1, we're going to get rid of that. And kind of like what we did with the paint program, we're going to put score equals 0. And remember, in the paint program, we did pixel equals 5. Or size equals 5, I think it was. All right, so, and the train of thought is we're going to have score equals remain the same, but the 0 we want to change as, we play the game. And then last one, we have button 2. So let's rename that. Remember, this is my reset button, so we'll call this button reset. Oops, I got a typo here. All right, and we're going to go and fix some properties here. Height and width, we're going to go to fill parent. All right, and for text for button 2, we're going to delete that out, and we're going to type in reset. And then default background color, we can keep it the same if need be. And if you wanted to, let's see. They offer, they don't offer much, but if you wanted to, you can change the text, as you can see there as well, just so that it's not the same, the same look and feel every single time. I'm going to use monospace on this only because that kind of looks more like an old school, an 8-bit type of, game played back in the day. So let's change the label score as well. So default monospace. All right, just something different. All right, so we've got that all taken care of. So now what we're going to do is we are going to continue on. So the only other thing that I need in here is I need a label. I need my canvas. So I'm going to go into drawing and animation. I'm going to click on my canvas, and I'm going to drop it on my screen. And then I'm going to change the height and the width to both fill parent. All right, so we got this nice big, size real estate here that we can kind of swipe our finger across and play our game on. All right, so as I showed you in that drawing, we want to add some things on top of our canvas here. And all right, we got our ball and our image sprite, and we're going to be using both of those. So I'm just going to click and drag on the ball, drag it and drop it on the screen. All right, so this gives me my properties over here. And as you can see, initially the ball is set to enabled. Excuse me, and that means that the ball it's set to move. Well, if you want to think of it, when we play our game, all right, when we start the program, we want the ball not to move. We want it just to kind of be stationary up top here. And what I want is when I click the start button, I want the ball to start moving. So what I want to do is I want to uncheck this up here. I want to set it to disabled, because that's when it's unchecked. That's what it means, which means the ball shouldn't be moving. And it only should move when I hit the start button. The heading and interval, that just tells us the direction that it's going. We can leave that as is. That's totally fine. The radius is just nothing more than the size of the ball. So if I wanted to make just this monster ball, I can change the radius, and as you can see, the size totally changes. But I don't want to have something super big like that. I'm going to put it down to 6. Obviously, 1 pixel bigger than 5, so it's a decent size that when it's bouncing around. If you want to make it a little bit bigger to make it less challenging, that's fine. You want to make it smaller to make it more challenging, totally fine too. So the height and the width, well, we don't need to change. I'm on the wrong one here. We don't need to change anything else. Speed, we're going to leave it as is. We're going to set that within the code. Visible just basically means if we want to make the ball visible or not, and we do want to make it visible, so leave it checked off. All right, and then this is basically the position where the ball currently is at. And as you can see right now, the X and Y coordinates are 98 and 39. If I were to click on this and drag it somewhere else on the screen, we have now 220 and 91. right? We can set this, though, in code on the other side. So we can just, it doesn't matter where it is right now. But ultimately what we're going to want is we're going to want to start the ball at the very top somewhere. All right, so that's good enough. We don't have to do anything more than that. The next thing we need to do is we need to click on our image sprite here, and let's drag and drop that on our screen. All right, so one thing that you're going to need to do ahead of time, or at least when you get to this point, you're going to have to go on the internet. You're going to have to download any sort of picture or whatever that you want to use, because you don't necessarily need to use a paddle. What I ended up doing was I already uploaded a file where all you have to do is just like any media, you go to upload, choose file, and then navigate to the file in question. But let me throw the picture on here. I downloaded a black rectangle and I created a paddle out of it, and I'm going to use that as my paddle, so when I swipe my finger across the screen, all right, the ball will bounce around and then hopefully hit the paddle, and then I'll accrue a point from that. So all you have to do, you could use anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a paddle. You can use an image of whatever you want. The only thing that you might need to do, though, is that you might have to shrink or size down the image. And I know the school offers, I believe, Photoshop and a couple other photo editing or digital media editing software at your disposal. So you just might have to open it up. If you can't find anything else on your computer, if you can just use like a generic Microsoft Paint program, and you can change the dimensions of the photo and scale it down. I believe that the dimensions I used for this photo here, I believe I changed the width to 70 pixels and the height was 20 pixels, I believe. So you can change your dimensions of that. If you want your paddle a little bit bigger to make it a little less challenging, you can maybe change it to 80 or 90 pixels wide by 20 pixels high. But again, however you want to do it is fine. All right, so that being said, what I'm going to do, though, on my image sprite, all right, and you'll notice that if you compile your code now, you're going to have a very big canvas that you can play your game on, but this paddle is going to look like it's somewhere in the middle of your screen, right? But I want this paddle toward the bottom, just because, I don't want, this whole bottom area to be exposed with, the paddle being way up here. So what I'm going to do actually is under the Y component here, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to change this to, let's do 600. And I might need to edit this, but what this is going to do, this is going to adjust my X and Y coordinate of, of basically where the paddle should be. And now by doing that, as you see, the paddle goes off the screen, and that's because like where my cursor is right now, the paddle's somewhere down here. And because I don't see it, that's fine. I still know it's there. And when you compile your code, you'll see where it is, and it's going to look a lot better where it is currently located. I might have to alter this, though, because I might find that the paddle maybe is somewhat off the screen. So I might have to come back in here and then hard code this value to maybe like 550 or maybe even 500. But we'll do 600 for now, and then when we test the program initially, we'll see what it looks like. All right, and the last thing that I need is I'm going to go into user interface, and I'm going to use this notifier option here. All right, so just like you did in the Paint app, so I'm going to drag this, I'm going to drop it on the screen, and as you see, it's a non-visible component, so it's showing up down here. In the Paint app, you had to use this notifier to let the individual know when they kept on clicking the minus button that eventually you cannot have negative pixels or even a 0 pixel. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you throw a notifier in here as well, so that if the ball hits the bottom of the screen, we let the people know game over, and then they have to redo, the reset the game and start all over again. All right, so I think that should do it. If you have any other ideas or enhancements that you want to add in this, that's fine. But we're going to kind of keep it at that, and let's get into the code piece of it. All right, so again, because of the fact that the buttons dictate everything that is going on, all right, that's going to be my starting point, my button start and my button reset. And I'm going to obviously start with button start. So I'm going to click on that, and again, once I click the button, I want the whole thing to fire off and, the event to begin. So I'm going to click on button start. I'm going to just drop it in here. All right, so what are we going to do? Well, to kind of take a step back so that we understand my train of thought here, I'm going to go back into my little notepad here. Well, if I get some of this deleted out. So again, what I want to do is I want to have my ball start at the very top of my screen. All right, that's my thought process. And when I click the start button, I want the ball to drop or to begin in motion. Now, if I don't change anything, it's the heading that it's set to right now will cause the ball to drop straight down. And once it hits the paddle, it's basically just going to rebound straight up. And what you would end up getting is basically the ball bouncing up, down, up, down, up, down, and not traveling anywhere on the screen. And I don't want that because that's just boring and people are not going to want to play that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little code in here, a move to option, and I'm going to, well, the first thing I want to do is I want to get the ball fixated at the very top of my screen. So I'm going to use the move to option to get the ball to be centered at the very top in the X direction and also to be at the 0 point in the Y direction. So if you remember when we look at in our math classes, when we learned our coordinate systems, we always said that the origin or the 0, 0 point is always at the very center of the cross between the X and the Y coordinates. Well, again, in App Inventor, that direct center, the origin, is always going to be in the top left-hand corner. So that means when we go this way across the screen, all right, we're getting more and more positive in our X direction. And unfortunately, when we go downward, we're getting positive as well, all right, unlike math where we got negative when we went down. So if I move the ball to the center of the screen here, all right, well, then that's going to be my midpoint. And from the Y perspective, my value should be 0. So my coordinate at the midpoint here should be, you know, like I said, midpoint, whatever that value is going to be, comma, 0. All right, so I need to figure out what this midpoint is. And that's why when I hit start or reset, it's going to bring the ball to the very top here. Once the ball is brought to the very top, the next thing that I want to do when I hit the start button, I want to enable the ball, basically to get it to move. And then I'm going to want to drop it somewhere in this direction or this direction. And I want to randomize it. I don't want it to be the same every time because then it becomes predictable. So the ball needs to shoot off to the left, or it needs to shoot off into the right, or somewhere in between these two directions. And so how do we do that? Well, we basically have to find the angle that we want to use. And to not go too crazy into it, but I'm going to just kind of use the 45-degree angle in between quadrants 3 and quadrants 4. And again, if you remember, when we rotate counterclockwise in our coordinate system, all right, that equals 360 degrees. So at the very top up here, whoops, get rid of that. At the very top up here, that's going to be my 90-degree angle with respect to where I started from. This is going to be my 180 degree. This area will be my 270, and then it'll be back to 360 again over here. So the angles, or this angle here specifically, is the 45 or the midpoint between angles 180 and 270. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 180 and I'm going to add 45 to it. All right, and that should give me a value of 225, because then if I add 45 to this, that'll give me 270. So 225 is that midpoint between those two angles right there. If I apply the same logic to this direction over here, all right, all it is going to be is 270, which is down here, plus 45. All right, and that should then give me 315. All right, so I'm going to use these two angles here because that's going to allow me to shoot the ball off in one of those directions. And then I'm going to randomize that number so it picks a number between those two, and that means the ball will shoot off somewhere in between there as well. All right, so that's my train of thought. That's what I'm going to do. So like I said, the first thing I want to do is I want to move the ball to the very top of the screen. So what I'm going to do, because I'm moving the ball, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go under ball. These are all the event handlers we have access to use, but we're not using those just yet. And as we see over here, we have a move to function, and that's what I want, because that's going to change the X and the Y coordinates of that ball. So if you remember on the first page, when I went here and I took the ball and then I moved the ball, all right, I said that the X and Y coordinates were changing. And you can see that because right now it's 129 and 30. And I move it again, we have now 180 and 75. So like I said, I want to set that position here. I don't want to just do it manually on the other side. So the question is now, what am I going to set it to? Well, if you remember on that drawing I just did, I want the ball to be at the very top of the screen. So I want to set the Y value to 0 because that's the very top. So if I go under my Math tab and I scroll to the top and grab a 0, I can just take that and I can plug that into my Y component. Well, what about the X? Well, again, if you remember, what I want to do is I want to situate that ball in the middle of the screen. Now, you could throw a random number in there and say 200, but if you remember when we looked at the canvas, all right, we set our width to fill parent. So we shouldn't set the width to an actual number because this fill parent could be 200 pixels wide, could be 400, could be 800. And if the canvas scaled itself to 200 pixels wide, well then if you use the number 200, you're going to be in the top right-hand corner. If the canvas was 800 pixels wide, all right, and you use 200, you're going to be somewhere toward the left of the screen. All right, I want it directly in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under my canvas, and there's a function down here that's called canvas width, okay? Not line width, that's something completely different. Canvas width. So I want to grab this value here. So what this means is that when I start my program, if the screen auto scales to 500 pixels, it's basically going to grab that value, and then this value is going to equal 500. But remember, I don't want to plug it in like this, all right? Because this is then going to just situate the ball all the way to the right every single time. I want to get the midpoint every time. So what that means, in order to find the midpoint or in order to find the average of something, you just basically have to divide the object by 2. Obviously, if there was 2 numbers. So in order to find the midpoint, I need to divide this by 2. So that being said, I'm going to go into my math block here, and I'm going to grab the divisor, and I'm going to plug this in. So what I want is I want to take this canvas width, plug it in here, and I want to divide that value by 2, all right, and that will then give me the value that I'm looking for. All right, so that will, when I click the start button, that will move the ball to the very top center every time. The next thing I need to do when I click start is that I have to get the ball to move. All right, so I'm going to go back into my ball, and let's scroll down to my green blocks here. All right, and the very first one is our ball.enabled. All right, so I want to click on this because when I enable something, I'm setting it to move, in the case of the ball. And because this is called a Boolean, it will take a Boolean input, meaning a true-false input. To find those, I'm going to go up here to logic, and I want to click on true. Because remember, that's where on the other side I said to uncheck that box because it was originally set to true. By unchecking it, we set it to false, meaning the ball's not going to move. But now when I click on the start button, it's going to change that from false to true, which means the ball's going to start moving. Well, the ball's going to start moving. Where do we want to, which direction do we want it to go? All right, well, again, that's where I was talking about those angles earlier. So I'm going to go back into my ball, go down to the green blocks, all right, and there's the very next one, which is called heading. So I want to click on set heading, and I want to add this into my block here. And again, the heading is going to be somewhere between that value 225 and 315. But remember, I said I wanted to randomize that value. So if I go into my math block here, there is a function, all right, where it says random integer from 1 to 100. So this is what I need. I want to click on this, and I want to plug that in. And like I said, over here, I want to make this 225, and then I'm going to make this value 315. All right, and that will allow my ball to randomly fall in some direction. Almost done with the ball piece. There's 2 more things we need. But once I hit the start button, well, how fast should the ball travel? Because again, remember, all these are options on this screen over here. Like here, speed right here. So we want to change the speed. Interval, we want to change the interval, all right? And we're going to do those next 2. So if I go back into my ball, scroll down, I want to look for speed, and I want to set the speed of the ball. And all that means is how fast the ball, how many pixels will the ball travel across, every given second. All right, and I want to start this off slower. All right, so I'm going to click on math. I'm going to grab that math block up top. I want to put a number in here, and I want to change this from 0 to 5. All right, and then we can adjust the speed if we think it's too fast or too slow after we start testing our program. All right, and then last thing we have to do is the interval. All right, and so the interval is basically, where's the ball? There it is. The interval acts as sort of like a clock, if you will. All right, so it will, the ball will execute as true. It will travel in this direction at this speed, and it's triggered to move at the interval of however many milliseconds that you provided. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to control-click on the number 5 to duplicate, and I'm going to set this value to 10. So for every 10 milliseconds, there's an internal clock firing, which is triggering the ball to stay true, travel in this direction, and travel at this speed. All right, so let's test this really quick. Let me open up my App Inventor, and let's just see what it looks like, and let's just see actually if it is working. I'll go to Connect AI Companion. I'm going to scan my code. All right, so it's up and running, so let me do this. Let me switch over to my camera. All right, so I have my paddle, and this is why I fixed my paddle to 600, all right, because I want to, otherwise the paddle would have been up here, leaving us all this blank space. So now the paddle's down here. Obviously, I can't move the paddle yet because I haven't inputted that code. The only thing I've done so far was a start button, so when I hit start, the ball starts from the very top and then travels down in this direction. I hit start again, it now goes in the other direction. Start again, so as you can see, every single time I hit start, the ball is being brought to the very top of the screen, and it's traveling off in some direction at that speed and interval, every single time. All right, so far, it's looking and working how I want it to be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it right there because I have to keep the videos under 30 minutes each, otherwise the program will not let me save it. And I'm close to about 28 minutes right now. I'm going to create another video which should complete everything from there. So that being said, we will see you in the next one.